Welcome to the next edition of our Mediate.com book club. We are very excited about this session today, and I'm just going to hand it over to Claire, who's going to be our host. So Claire, please take it away.
Perfect. So as we were looking at the book club schedule, Colin was talking about some different books that he'd been hearing about and different authors that he wanted to bring in. And he mentioned this one. I said, oh my gosh, I just read that book. Please let me jump in, because I'm just excited to talk to Dan and Tara about the content of your book. So I don't want to spend too much time of me talking about it. I really just want to hear you talking about it. But I have to say, what really stunned me was I feel like there are a lot of advanced mediation books that have spun off of our basic principles, and they're going off and they're refining this one particular branch, right? Which is very interesting, and it's always great to do. What I really liked was I felt like you were coming back to the basics, right? What is it that mediation is really about? What is the core trunk, to speak, right? Instead of going off into a particular branch, like you were discussing, you were refining advanced mediation, but you were doing so at the very basic level of what mediation is about. And it really changed my perspective of how I mediate and how I interact with clients. And I was just so appreciative of that. So again, you don't want to hear me talk. I want to hear you talk. So could we just begin with, well, first off, how did you two begin working together? What was that like?
Tara.
It's like this the whole time. We're always deferring to each other. Well, I could say, okay, I met Dan in 2018 when I took a training of his, the basic transformative mediation training.
Okay.
And was completely I was sold on the approach, but I still did have questions about exactly how it would apply in different cases. And we ended up becoming friends, and we were both working on our own writing projects. And so we would exchange drafts, and eventually it just became clear, we have a lot in common and a lot we could add to each other's backgrounds and ways of looking at this. So it's pretty much just like that, right, Dan?
Yeah, I'd add that you, Tara, were off to a good start already on your book, your other book, The Mediator's Approach, 5.5 Paths Through Conflict, which surveyed 5.5 different approaches to mediation. And so I knew that you had the capacity to write a book, and I didn't know if I had that capacity yet. So that helped, having somebody who I knew could get that done. And then also the fact that you were so experienced with doing the research and kind of looking up the studies that supported, the things we wanted to say about self-determination. Also, part of what made me think, yeah, I want to work with this person, because I've got all these stories to tell, and so I needed a partner who was going to be good at writing and helping with me trying to tell those stories, and then also obviously had all of this knowledge and wisdom about the whole mediation thing. So anyway, good fit. We just kind of,
I love it,
connected that way. Yeah.
So Dan, the original idea for the book came from you.
I mean, I don't know. The book very much evolved once we started working together. I had been writing this blog for the Institute for the Study of Conflict Transformation, where I'd written many anecdotes about mediations, and I had been thinking about somehow taking those and fitting those into a book for a long time.
Yeah, I've published many of those. Thank you for doing those.
Thank you for publishing those. Yes, that's right. And so, but then when Tara and I, the book really took shape as a result of our talking about it. So yeah, the collaboration happened as we were trying to figure out what the book should be.
Sure. I would love, before we dive into the book, I would love to hear a little bit about the writing process. I imagine that must have taken some of your mediation skills, right? Reflecting, absorbing, doing a lot of yes and. What was that like?
Yeah, well, I'll jump in. Again, the partnership, the fact that we figured out how to work so well together was key. Certainly the mediation skills that we each have. I mean, you know, little conflict emerged between us, and we got to process that and learn from that as we went. That was certainly part of the process. We both, you know, I was just thinking about how if you read the book, some of it is in the first person as I'm telling stories about mediations. Don't let that fool you. Tara was very involved in the writing of every every word, including the ones that are in the first person by me. So anyway, very, very much back and forth. Both one of us would write a chunk and the other would look at it, and we'd go back and forth with it. Yeah.
And I want to add that we both have very different writing styles, and like the stories, even though I would add something to it, like I couldn't do that the way Dan is writing, like almost like a work of fiction. Like you really feel like you're in the room. That was all Dan. I might have questions about, you know, maybe you could add more here or whatever, but it was really very much a taking our strengths and putting them together. And we did, Dan, what were you going to say, Dan?
Well, you had the academic experience of publishing papers, you know, research papers yourself, which also added an important element to the writing. Yeah.
Thank you. But also on the topic of conflict, I just want to mention Dan is the master at, yes, reflecting back whenever he heard anything that suggested a complaint. He would, you know, very patient, reflecting back, and it helped that we had that background, because it is hard to write, to spend like 3 years working on a book together.
Absolutely. For those here that don't know you, can you tell us a little bit more about some of your backgrounds? Like, what experience are you bringing into this book?
Dan?
Sure. Well, so I've been mediating since 1998 full time, and then teaching it since about 2004. The thing that got me really inspired and made me decide to mediate full time was hearing Baruch Bush speak. He's one of the 2 authors of The Promise of Mediation, and I had earlier had a couple of trainings in mediation, and his articulation of he kind of helped reconcile for me this dilemma between mediation is supposed to be about self-determination, but at the same time, we're kind of selling mediation as a way to avoid court and get a settlement done. And so when I was first trained as a mediator, I kind of would pay lip service to self-determination. Meanwhile, I knew what should happen. They should come to some kind of deal and get the deal done. So that felt like that was confusing to me. So Bush and Folger's work helped me realize that, oh, actually, I can commit to one of those two, self-determination. And by the way, that often leads to people figuring out a settlement, and it's great, but it came from them. So anyway, that's what got me going on this path back in 98. Yeah.
Dan, it's funny. We have been re-examining our basic mediation training standards and what the mediation standards should be. And it's funny, I feel like I've been on the same path, and I feel like it's kind of representative of our culture, where same thing, I took my initial mediation training, and I remember hearing these words about self-determination. It's like, oh, that's nice and fluffy, but you know, we have to reach an agreement, and that's really the outcome. Yeah. And as our society has become much more aware of their need to self-empower, right? And to take care of themselves and to find themselves and to grow through this process, it really has come back to self-determination for me. Like, this is what is special, right? This is the fairy dust of mediation, that we're helping people to learn more about themselves, right? And that's beautiful. You don't see that in a lot of other processes. So I'm so glad that you came back to that. And I think that's why mediation is taking off more and more in our culture, because that's what people are hungry for, right? And this is something that you latched onto so early. So, okay, sorry, Tara, over to you.
Okay. So I actually had been trained in a few different approaches to mediation before I came into the transformative approach.
Okay.
And so I was coming from a place where instead of like worrying about trying to get people to the deal, I was worried about people bullying each other. And so my questions of self-determination involve, like, does a person have self-determination if someone else seems to be in charge. They're just submitting, to the other person.
Yeah.
And so the transformative approach and working on this book together, just having conversations with Dan to try to figure it out. Like, what does it mean? What does self-determination really mean?
Yeah.
Is it, and then we realized, well, we can't control the self-determination of everyone vis-a-vis everyone else, but we ourselves can decide that we're not going to take over, and we're going to support them in getting as clear as they want to be on who they're going to defer to, and with the idea that that will probably lead to them standing up for themselves, and then the other person not being as much of a bully.
Yeah.
So I really reconciled it from a different direction for me.
Yeah, I like it.
Well, and I just want to add that the trippy part for me, the part that was very hard to articulate, and that I hope we articulated somehow in the book, is this paradox. We're talking about party self-determination, but we're claiming that the mediator can do something to actually enhance that. And when you first think about it, wait a minute, the mediator's having an influence, that means less influence for the parties. Well, no, actually, we're claiming it is possible for a person who's focused on it to enhance, increase, amplify the self-determination of another person, which is weird and hard to wrap one's mind about, but that's what we're saying. Yep, that's what we're claiming. Yeah.
So your tagline on the book is the art and science of mirrors and lights, which again sounded like a really nice title. I didn't quite understand it until I read the book, and now I realize that's exactly what it needs to be called. What I'm wondering, Tara, would you mind just giving us the definition? What does that mean, the mirrors and the lights? And then Dan, I'm wondering if you could give us a couple of examples of when you're using a mirror or when you're using a light.
That is a trickier question than it seems.
I know it is.
Because we realized, and what we talk about at the beginning is that mirrors and lights work together. Yeah. A mirror can't reflect anything in the dark, and people can also see themselves, and people can see each other through the mirror as well. So in its simplest form, we would say the mirrors is the reflection, like where you can basically see yourself, and lights is being able to see the other person, the situation, opportunities for choices more clearly.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, so those are the things that we can do to possibly create the opportunity for enhanced self-determination by the parties. Holding a mirror up to them, so by reflecting whatever it is they say, with the intention of capturing what they said without trying to reframe it or nudge them somewhere else or redirect them, but to genuinely hold a as undistorted mirror as possible up to them by reflecting. I see, so you're saying that the sky is green and the grass is blue. And to the extent that, the other person sees that differently, then we're ready to reflect them. Oh, you're saying you see that very differently. It's the grass that's green and the sky that's blue. And meanwhile, that's also having the impact of illuminating the conversation, shining a light on it. So we shine a light by the reflections, do it a little bit. The summary of the conversation, again, in which we try to just be true to what they have been saying. And then the checking in to shine a light on the fact that they have the opportunity to make more choices as we go here. So it is illuminating and helping them get a better view of their opportunities to make choices and the reality that they have been making choices already, all of that.
Yeah. In the book, you begin with this idea of that parties are sitting at the mediation table and they're trying to explain what they want, but they're doing so with diminished agency. Before we move on, can we talk about that? Just because I think that's probably true of a lot of parties, right? They kind of know what they want, but they sort of don't know how to picture it or to verbalize it. So can you talk about that concept of diminished agency? What does that mean?
Did you want me to?
Sure.
Yeah, go for it, Tara.
So a lot of it comes from from Boric Bush and Joe Folger's book, The Promise of Mediation, and their definition of a vicious circle of conflict. So it's the disempowerment, this feeling of I don't know what to do, I'm overwhelmed, I'm confused. I'm just not aware of my own power. I think that would be the simplest way I would say it. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, and I would say that I feel like clearly in the worst moments of conflict, it is a natural symptom to feel stuck, weak, like you don't have many options. And you know, and so when you ask people at that worst moment what they want, they say, well, I want this to stop, and I want him to be freaking more reasonable. And by the way, I want a certain settlement number. And that's part of the story. And that's and as they get clearer, they're able to take into consideration more of the reality of the situation, more of the fact that the other person genuinely sees it differently and isn't going to necessarily agree to the settlement I want. And so as I get greater clarity about the reality of the situation and also what is most important to me, that's, you know, that's what Bush and Folger call the empowerment shift. But it's also this sense of weakness, I think, is something that I myself kind of am always somewhere on the continuum between, you know, weak and strong every day. And once the coffee kicks in, I get a little bit stronger and more confident and more aware that I have choices. Before the coffee, you know, I'm overwhelmed and I'm not sure what to do next. And so, like, I feel like this is a fundamental part of being a human, that we're at various levels of empowerment, and conflict tends to really put us in that weakened state. Yeah. And so if a person in conflict can somehow experience these empowerment shifts, that's when good things happen for everybody.
Absolutely. So I'm reflecting back on the mental health conference that we were able to do last year. And we got to have amazing speakers, and I learned so much from it. And we looked at the beginning, the deterioration of mental health, like right in the beginning, you know, when people are starting to feel a little bit attacked, a little bit overwhelmed, and where that goes, right? And so we had experts come in with just, I'm feeling a little stressed, all the way to I'm having suicidal ideations. What was interesting was that a lot of them were saying the same thing, that their mental health was attacked when they felt like they had an obstacle in front of them that they didn't know how to deal with. They knew that things were wrong. They couldn't see the picture, right? They couldn't see a way around it. They didn't feel strong enough. They felt like they just didn't know how to tackle this thing. And so it was just kind of this feeling of, well, I give up. I just don't know what to do. And I guess that, so I'm coming back to that idea in your book. That's what I thought was so empowering about it, was that it's like you're saying, actually, people do have an incredible amount of agency. They have an incredible amount of power, but sometimes they just don't see it, right? Sometimes they are coming to the table with this feeling of being diminished or not enough or hopeless. And that's where we can shine a light, right? That's where we can say, hey, look, let's go this way. There's a way out, there's a path, or there's hope in you.
That's right.
Yeah.
We make the philosophical, sorry, Tara.
Well, there's just a common, I don't know if you were saying that we would actually say that, but there are some people I think that part of empowering is to say, hey, you can do it. But ironically, we would say,
right,
you're feeling stuck, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're done.
Yeah.
And that ironically, I suppose, is what empowers them. Okay, I'm hearing, I'm being supported in wherever I am, and then I can be stronger without being pushed or pulled to be stronger.
Right, because they're feeling validated. They're feeling okay, like somebody is recognizing where they are. And
well, and just seeing it back helps them see where they are. Yeah.
Another choice a professional might make if the client is in this state we're talking about is to say, I got this. I can handle it. Here's what you should do. Right. I've seen this situation 1,000 times.
Yep.
You should do this. And that there's a market for that. And, you know, I think in a way, a lot of mediation that's provided does purport to give people that sort of guidance. And so that's why it's kind of interesting. I think that's why I hope our book has an impact in showing that, okay, people are susceptible to that pitch at that moment, that the answers.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I'm susceptible to the pitch myself as a professional that I know the answers. I love the
Right.
idea that I know what people should do.
Yeah.
Very, very intoxicating.
But it's also frightening, right? There's that moment where people turn to you looking for the answers, and you feel for a second like, gosh, I should have the answers. I feel like I should have some magic phrase to help them. And that's when we've taken the ownership, right? Instead of leaving the ownership and the power with our clients.
That's right. That's right. They may even have the fantasy that you do have the answers, and it's possible. And we are smart people with a lot of experience with conflict, and so we might have very smart things to say at that moment. And so that's part of the. I hope we captured some of that in the book as well. Kind of the constant self-monitoring that makes sense for a mediator who's committed to this stuff to do. It's tempting though it is. Well, and I certainly tell stories of where I caved and acted on these impulses.
Yeah.
And I don't believe it was so helpful to the clients when I did that.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. Okay. So next question. I was wondering about some of the concerns that people might have with what you have written. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're sitting at the mediation table and you're starting to do some of this work, and somebody says, why are you so focused on me? Obviously they're the problem. Like, I'm fine. Can you just tell them what's wrong with them, or tell them that they need to accept my offer or something, right? Where they, because when people come to the mediation table, it's usually because they're hoping that somebody will agree with them that the other person is wrong, right? And then when you start shifting, when you start reflecting with that mirror and showing them what they're actually saying, do you find that people are resistant to that?
I must say it feels pretty rare that people get defensive around this sort of reflection, because the reflection really is done with the, when whatever they're saying, when they say, he's the problem, I'm a victim, will you please help me with him? Yeah. I'm right there with her. Okay, so he's the problem. You'd like help dealing with him. And she gets so the experience of getting reflected is doesn't tend to feel like it puts them on the spot so often. But also you're right that people can come in with the kind of clear belief that no, obviously the mediator is going to see that the other person is the problem, and I'm hoping that the mediator identifies that. And so they may be disappointed because that exactly isn't going to happen. Yeah. But they are going to get support for wanting that to happen, wishing it would happen. Yeah. Seeing the other person the way they do. Thankfully, most often my experience lately, especially as I've gotten more comfortable mediating in this way, is that people do see the value of it, and they see that, oh, I get it. Okay, he's also being supportive of the other guy. Oh, that's calming down the other guy. Oh, okay. Oh, helpful. Usually. Yeah. That's good. Sarah, did you have a thought about that whole dynamic?
I was just thinking how thus far I have not mediated in this way with anyone that I didn't have a conversation with ahead of time. Except there was one case where I only spoke with one of the parties ahead of time, but I try to be really clear about what it is I am doing so they know what to expect ahead of time. And I can imagine though, going into a situation where they didn't know what to expect, they might be surprised, and you have to. Right. What would you say? What would that conversation look like ahead of time? Yeah. So I explained to them my theory of conflict. Well, as I'm talking to them about their conflicts, ahead of time, I will say, like, a lot of times in conflict, people can't hear each other. Things spiral out of control because one person jumps in before the other person had a chance to finish. And the next thing you know, you're off in this, vicious circle. And yes, they can definitely relate to that. And so I'll say, what I do is often will reflect what I'm hearing. And what that does is it gives people a chance to, before things get out of control, pause, think about, was that what I meant to say, clarify it. And I explain that that's what I'm doing and how that helps. They seem to get that. Yeah, I love it.
I just noticed, I think this feels relevant to me at the moment, that the last couple of mediations I did just this week, this method if I were to try to describe to you how this impacted the conversation, my main thought is what happened was these folks had a good conversation. That's what happened. I believe maybe that my presence was helpful in that. I did this thing where I reflected what people said, and occasionally I summarized what they agreed about and what they disagreed about. It seemed to me that when one person spoke, the other person heard it and often responded in a way that revealed that they had heard it, and then asked another question. Information was exchanged. And so like, I feel like when it goes well, it's sort of the mediator can fade into the background, and all that happened was a conversation. And so that's, I'm just noticing that these last two mediations I did, I felt very much that way. Like, I'm glad I did that. No, I don't know. It's also impossible really to know my impact. Obviously, I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't been there for that mediation. The conversation also might have gone well, I'm afraid, you know?
Yeah.
So that's.
What was, I had it tagged, it might take me a second to find it, that the quote about, we're stepping into, when we mediate, you say it. We're stepping into the flow.
Our friend Judy Saul said that you're stepping into the river of their life. Do you have it better in mind, Tara?
You know, I have the book here right in front of me, but it would take me a second to find it.
All right, I know I tagged it, so I can probably find it quickly. While I'm looking for that, what I was wondering was, as you were writing this, who were you picturing reading it? Right? Were you imagining, oh, this will be helpful for family mediators, or for people going through a divorce, or for managers? Like, what was your intended audience there?
I think it was mediators, right? I mean, the main audience. Would you say, Dan?
Yeah. And yet I was also thinking about how universal these themes were. To me, we're living, I don't know, I feel like I'm living in a world where the political polarization is such a significant part of the story of existence nowadays, and coping with the pandemic and the different takes on all that. And just to me, that the fact that there's so much fear from both sides of the political continuum that authoritarianism is taking over by the other guys. And so the idea that the antidote for everybody is a greater sense of agency, and a greater sense that we are being either threatened or terrified into, or whatever, behaving in a certain way, is a big deal. And so somehow reclaiming our sense of agency is so important to democracy and everything. So I was hoping this was it felt like it was very much of the moment as we were writing it, that it's a big deal, right. Human agency, you know?
Yeah. When I initially picked it up, I had assumed, of course, that it was going to be for more experienced mediators. But again, as I was reading through it, there are so many important concepts here about valuing our own instincts and valuing our own intuitions. And so I was imagining that it could be very beneficial for clients to read and understand that when you're going to be reflecting back to them, that there's something in their instincts, there's something in their agency, there's something about understanding their own self-worth and their own power in the process that that makes the mediation even more magical, right? That they're not coming to mediation to get to be with Dan and to get to be with Tara, the experts, but instead what you're going to be doing is showing that the value inside of them. And that's I've
gotten some nice feedback from a couple of friends or cousins of mine who are not mediators, who read it and found it, at least to my face, they said they found it very, very engaging and interesting on that level of what it means to make one's own choices, and what one other person can do to help another person make their own choices. Yeah,
it's good.
Yeah, so we wrote it for mediators, but really everyone in the world should read it. Short answer.
I agree. Yes, I agree.
Well, they should at least buy copies of it. I don't know if they should read it.
There it is. Right. So what I was thinking we could do next, and I would like to selfishly take the first turn, but then I will gladly let all of you have a turn as well. I would like to throw a situation at Dan and Tara and hear how you would respond. So, please, while I'm talking, please come up with your own examples here, or maybe a difficult situation that you're facing where you would love to get Dan and Tara's expertise while we have it. So, is that okay?
Great. No, I love it. Love
Okay,
it.
good. I should have asked you first. So, Dan and Tara, I was just asked to jump into a mediation. A mediator got sick. They asked me to fill in last minute, and it's about a manager. And what's interesting is I've been hearing this theme come up pretty frequently, and I'm wondering if it's a fallout from COVID. I don't know. We'll have to see how everything plays out over the next couple of years. But they've said that the entire team is just isolated, right? They're just not connected anymore. And the problem with that, with not being connected, is that whenever the team brings something up to the manager, she just feels instantly attacked, right? And she becomes instantly defensive, and she either cries or she screams, and she just can't hear any of that feedback. And she's feeling disconnected from the team, and the team doesn't feel like they have their support, and the team is getting frustrated because they're not feeling connected either, right? Which makes sense. We've been living in our jammies in our living room for the last few years. So I understand that they're not connected, but how would you use so finally getting to my question, how would you use some of these principles with someone who is just so incredibly defensive, right? Where they don't want to hear anything about themselves. They're already feeling on the defensive. They're already feeling attacked, already feeling like their team or their partner or whomever doesn't like them. And I feel like your approach is probably going to be the crucial piece to allow them to just start to feel accepted by their team. But I'd love to hear what you would do in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to start?
I'm ready to go. I always don't mind jumping in. Should I go for it?
Go for it.
Well, so a couple of things that popped to my mind is, depending on how big the team is, I'm thinking that I want to give her some input into how big how many people participate in the conversation. And so, I don't know if this is part of your process, but ideally having a separate chat with each person first, and making sure that she doesn't wind up in a situation where she's going to feel ganged up on. And so if we can help the conversation happen in smaller configurations. And I'm aware, as I say that's already me doing something a little bit other than our approach. It's me making little kind of tiny judgment calls. And so I want to be constantly aware that I want the participants to make every possible choice while I'm exploring who should get together for that conversation.
Yeah.
But I think that the basic attitude, which is that this person gets full support for where she is, and the opportunity to decide if somewhere else that she wants to go about all this, and letting go of any responsibility for figuring it out. I have no idea what's going to lead them to a better place. All I know is this kind of faith I have that if I pay attention to these folks, including this manager, and she gets to explain how she has felt ganged up on or judged or whatever she has to say about it, and she just gets some space and light reflection so she can decide what to do next about it. Vague and abstract though that feels, that's where I would come in with.
I had the same thought, which was just the offer everyone, just as coming in, everyone has a chance to have an individual conversation if they want, and then reflect, summarize, empower from there. They might go ahead and say they want smaller groups, that she would feel more comfortable with that, but without suggesting it, but with maybe throwing it out as an option, like what would make you most comfortable? How could we do this? What are the options? Maybe.
Yeah. I heard this great story. I'm not going to, the summary of it was that when people feel like they have enough, when people feel like they're safe, that's when they have the freedom to move, right? As opposed to if somebody feels like they don't have enough or they're feeling ganged up on, right? That's when they're like freezing and hiding in the corner. And I just love that image with your reaction, because I feel like a typical mediator reaction would be, well, we need to get them to budge from their position and realize the negative effects of their behavior, right? But it's almost coming from a place that would make the person feel guilty, right? As if there was something wrong with them or something wrong with their behaviors. But what you're doing is the exact opposite. You're making them feel safe, right? You're giving them an understanding that they're enough and that they're okay. And I feel like it's only when people are at that place that then they might have a little bit of freedom to change if they make that choice themselves, right? But not because they're feeling shamed into it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that we don't have to define the problem ourselves. We don't have to come in saying, this is a manager who feels defensive, although that may be true, or this is a group of disrespectful millennials that are working for her, and they, they need to learn how real life is. Maybe true too, but not our place to say that or to try to make that happen. Our place just shine a light on them. And I mean, part of what makes this philosophy so appealing is that the long list of things that I don't have to figure out.
Yeah, right.
It's all for the parties to figure out. All I have to do is pay attention in the moment, which takes some energy and effort.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. In fact, speaking of these mediations that I did this week, Tara, I think I told you about the one where I couldn't reflect the story. Didn't I? I mean, I don't
think so.
So, you know, often what I would do after I hear the complainant in this workplace situation say what went wrong, I would repeat back. Okay, so on September 14th, this happened, and I just try to, reflect what they said. This one was on Zoom, and I maybe hadn't had enough caffeine, and there were so many details that I just really couldn't follow it, and so I did kind of a blunt reflection about, okay, so this has been going on for a long time, and it's been very frustrating, and you don't feel like management has had your back. And it was not the sort of reflection I aspire to that really gives them the detail to look at, but it was all I could muster. Anyway, that's just all back to the point that this is not that easy to do. It really takes focus, energy, and attention to do this. It is nice that I don't have to try to figure out big picture or diagnose or anything. That is nice. Got enough to do just to pay attention to the conversation in front of me, often more than I can really manage to do just trying to do that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Sue asked if she could have you both next, and then after that, the floor is open for other people that would like to jump in with some scenarios.
Nice to see you, Sue.
Good to see. I'm always a big supporter of transformative. And I have a case right now that I'm not sure I can follow my inner desires with it. Here's the situation. And I think this comes up more often, that it's not just the people at the table. It affects another person or people. So this is a special education case. It is, I'm going to say, a middle schooler who has been having great difficulty at school, has been coming only about half the time, and when there is not engaged, despite all the school's attempts to engage, like, you don't have to take these classes, you can take the classes you like, like they've really tried to address what this child needs. I have to say another piece about the child's experience. Step siblings, there was a court action, and the step siblings got taken out of dad's home and put into mom's home across the states. His mom committed suicide, and his brother, the one left, is now graduating, so not home, graduating from high school. So he's alone with dad now after having a big house. He writes an email to one student that says, I know where you are and I will shoot you. Dad is on the police watch list. He was found to have a stockpile of ammunition, guns, etc. Like, this is a dangerous situation. The school is done because not only did the student actually text just one kid, when they investigated it, found out it was a whole bunch. And talk about different realities. Dad says it was a joke. Anyone could have seen it was a joke. And I'm like, so was there haha? Was there a smiley face? Was like, what's the indication? Oh, you just have to know him. It was a joke. So my question is, using my preferred method in a situation that is, I want to say, literally life and death. Can I go against my values? Because I have other values too, right?
Yeah. And your preferred method would be transformative, you're saying?
Yes.
But you're feeling like in this case, something else would be safer?
It's not about my safety. It's about the child's safety who's not there. The child doesn't have agency. And according to the school, they think that the best result would be if the child got some inpatient therapy, because Dad says he's going to therapy, but therapy was 6 o'clock on Christmas Eve. That doesn't sound like any therapist I know is starting therapy at 6 o'clock on Christmas Eve. So don't know if it's, and Dad doesn't have to explain that part. So.
Yeah. So can I just ask some questions?
Sure.
Okay? Who's in the mediation in the room that you're working with?
So it'd be the school district person in charge of special education. The I say a preferred teacher. So a teacher that the student generally has a good relationship with, versus, that mean teacher. So, and then the dad. That's it.
Yeah. Is it okay if I just say a couple things that are coming to my mind? Is that, well, to the extent that you're actually in the room, like you are in a mediator role and you want to stay in that role, it's hard for me to imagine that there would be anything better than reflecting and then doing this approach of helping everyone just get clear about what their options are, what they want to do, hear each other, make the best decisions they can make. Because I always just come back to the idea that like, we can't have as much information about what their options are, what their resources, what their limitations are. The child, they always have more information than we do.
Absolutely.
So that the best thing we can possibly do is help them access their own information, strength, inner wisdom to make the best decisions they can. And that we don't have the, any kind of power to actually change anything. So unless you were talking about, like, if you don't feel like you can support them, if there's even one of them that you feel like, I just cannot be supportive, then I would say that the response then is to say, like, for whatever reasons, I don't feel like I can be helpful in this situation.
So I've done a mediation with them about 6-8 months ago. And then new school year, new issues, new.
So you're already involved, you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious what more directive intervention you're contemplating.
I'm not sure, but I in general always say parents have the best interests of the kids in mind, and schools want kids to succeed. I mean, so in general, I think that, people are coming from the right place. I'm not sure that this dad sees his kid.
Yeah.
Because he's had the same thing. His previous kids were taken away from him by the court. His wife committed suicide. His older son had, news media splashes around other issues.
So I just would not want to stand in the way of you having some insight about a helpful thing that you can do in this situation that would deviate from pure support for party self-determination in the conversation. To me, the world is complicated enough that my own rule is that if I might make an exception to my promise of confidentiality if I can do it and it's going to save somebody's life, then I will have violated my promise of, I'll break my rules. I will commit an ethical breach if I think under these circumstances it's the thing to do. So if you know of a thing that'll be helpful to this kid that goes outside of your role, like I'm open to what that might.
I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure yet. It's a tough one.
Yeah.
And as I say, it feels so life and death. And
right.
I think I'm pretty good, but I don't think I'm that good.
Well, a lot to put on yourself.
Part of being good is being aware of our limitations and not expecting that we can save everybody or anybody, actually. But here's what we can do.
And maybe it's just looking at the consequences of choices.
Yeah, which is also a mirror, right? Yeah.
Consulting with professionals, bouncing it off us and clarifying your own thinking by having people to talk to who will support you in getting clearer yourself about what to do, even though we don't know what you should do.
Right. Thank you. All right. I know that Milan, jump in, Milan.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, I wanted to start with a certain sadness about the fact that Mediate.com is the biggest website all around, and yet there are 9 people who are talking to each other about this book. It's strictly said to me, because I know how much effort both Colin and Claire put in all this. I remember when we were meeting the last time, which was probably a couple of months ago, and you all put so much effort into this book. And yet, it's such a limited number of people who are interested. And it's profoundly worrisome to me. Also for personal reasons, because I'm also in the middle of writing a book and I'm not sure what I'm doing. So that being said, I still believe, it's extremely important that you put these things, on the paper. You kind of let the world, at least you give, the readership the opportunity, even if they are not seem to be very interested, and that's the sadness part of it. But I like to encourage all of us, and let's just go forward. It just might happen at a certain point that there would be much more interest than it is today, especially with what you then mentioned, is this extraordinary polarization. And it is much more than polarization, it is division everywhere we look. So that's the sad part, but I really want to kind of jump and make a comment about the book. I'm always very interested about the titles of the books. And what captured my attention was essentially mirrors and light when it comes to your book. Those are 2 very interesting metaphors, which obviously are with us for long time. We use the words like enlightenment or being enlightened and this and that. And mirror, I'm just right now looking at 2 books, which are right now sitting on my desk, what is called Mirrors and Masks, which interestingly enough was written in '59. And it is coming from the field of social psychology. And the other one is called Secrets on the Ethics of Concealment and Revelation, which comes mostly from the moral kind of theory and moral philosophy. And so, as you said, both of you, these themes are with us for a long time, and they directly impact what we do. So when I was thinking about the mirrors, I had 2 questions. One, I think you then mentioned the word undisturbed mirror, and then you more focused on the word light. And so I will start with mirror. The word reflection is very interesting to me because it is not only that we are looking into the mirror, but also we are using our minds to reflect on something. So it is kind of has this kind of dual meaning. And what intrigued me about this metaphor is that undistorted or distorted can come through mirror in many different ways. For example, at what point you ask the question about the broken mirrors we are looking into, and what does it say about us? The second one was literally coming from physics. What does it mean if we are looking into the concave or a convex mirror? And finally, what has happened to us when we are in the labyrinths of mirrors, or it is just the maze, which are totally disoriented. So, I was just a couple of things came to me, when I was thinking of the metaphor or mirror in itself. So that's for you, Dan, and then for you, Tara, you used the word light. How much of a darkness did you bring into the book before you kind of brought the concept of light, forward? And please go ahead.
Well, so I just think it's so true what you're saying about the mirrors, that the undistorted mirror is kind of an ideal, and that all I know about the mirror is that I have the intention to reflect it, to reflect accurately, but I probably don't have insight into what sort of mirror I am really. And so all I can do is aspire to being true to the reflection, to the image that I'm reflecting. And I think that's I don't know how to get around the reality that I don't know what kind of distorted, convex, concave, colored mirror I am, True. Yeah.
Great. Because you use the word inspired, and I wrote that word down here too. Because there are a variety of things, when we are looking at others and we are so-called mirroring them, we might also emulate them or being inspired by them. So, there are a variety of things, when we are interacting with people, with parties, and they are doing the same thing, what we are getting through that interaction, and what they are getting, and what kind of mirror are we offering them. Yeah, so that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I can briefly say in terms of you asked what kind of darkness I was bringing into the book, that Dan would have to answer that. I think I'm a ray of sunshine all the time, but it's quite possible I was bringing some darkness into the book too.
No, you brought light. I'm not aware of the darkness you brought either, Tara. But it's just in terms of the metaphor and what it means. I think again, there is this, well, it's all a metaphor, so it's not really light exactly, but it's the idea that there is a direction that involves the ability to see more clearly, and that we, if nothing else, have these consciousnesses that we experience that can focus on the situation that our clients are in, and that can then try to describe the situation as we are seeing it, in our best efforts not to interpret or spin or darken, but to enlighten. And it's kind of keeps the work interesting, the fact that there's no correct way to do it. It's this art form. So it's the art of lights, Go
ahead, Sue.
So Milan, this was fascinating questions. I love your use of words, because what I took from that is, when I'm in a mirror and I'm trying to comb my hair, for example, oops, wait, wrong side. We see things backwards in the mirror. And so I got, what I need to do is really stand next to and look at the same scenery. That mirroring may not always be, I want to be careful about my words because Milan is so careful with them, that mirroring, in reflecting back, I may be giving it backwards. And so by standing next to and seeing the same thing, saying, this is what I'm seeing, what are you seeing? It may come differently. So I'm just playing with that in my mind as your consultation.
I just happened to notice this effect on Zoom earlier at a meeting today that you can mirror your video or not. And I just switched mine the way it was. And it's, this is not mirroring. This is, I guess, a more accurate. Now you guys are seeing the reality, but it's confusing to me as I look at it because my TV's over there.
Yeah. Milan, what I'm wondering is, as you were asking the question about what darkness had previously been, it's going to be cheesy and kind of metaphorical, but just for a split second. You can't reflect anything if there isn't a light source, right? Like I have a mirror sitting here, but if my room is completely dark, doesn't matter how many mirrors I have, right? It's not going to reflect a thing. But if the mirror is able to find a light source in front of it, then it's able to reflect that, right? And so I wonder if some of the darkness that people had previously been discussing, I don't think there's any darkness in Tara or in Dan, but I wonder if people had been seeing their clients through a dark lens, right? You kind of see that sometimes with really jaded mediators that like, oh, they're stuck on their position again. We're at impasse again. I need to go in and beat them up and get them down off their position to finally accept the other side's offer, right? And you're seeing the darkness in your client. But again, what I found so refreshing about your perspective was that you were very purposely, we're assuming that there was light in there, right? That if we reflect back, that they might see some things that were hard to see, but that there was an inherent good, that there was something beautiful in clients that they wanted to see and they wanted to build on. And that the mirror was really saying, hey, yeah, it might be hard to look at. There's some hard things to deal with in there, but look, there's this light as well. And that was powerful for me.
There absolutely is
actually an interesting theme altogether for me, because let's just think about the title of the book, which I mentioned, The Ethics of Concealment and Revelation. If we reveal something, it comes to the light. It comes out of the darkness. If we hide something, that's the metaphor of darkness which comes through. In other words, if we think about people that they have their bright and the dark side, then the question is what it is what they are willing to reveal and what it is what they are hiding. Okay? So that's and you, Claire, brought it exceptionally well, because you just indicated that there is no light without darkness. In certain ways, you know, how do we bring it up front is the one thing. The second thing about the mirror is that we are really not only thinking about ourselves, you know, as maybe mirror which the clients might be looking into, but we are thinking, you know, about how the clients are mirroring each other. And conflict is a very interesting thing when you can really see that sometimes we look at, you know, we listen to both sides and you realize that they are pretty much saying the same things about each other. And it is almost like they are mirroring each other when they are, you know, in the middle of the dispute, and especially if it is this kind of pretty intense and deep conflict when they cannot find the way out from, you know, like the extraordinary tragic situation which Sue just described.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, when people find themselves in that kind of predicament and deep hostility and hatred, you know, and so forth, which we are today dealing with almost every day. I mean, I'm absolutely amazed, you know, how everything finally came to the surface, to the light, as I would put it, you know, when it comes to animosity and hatred, which was, you know, for a long time hidden under the surface in darkness, whichever we really put it. And now question for us is, you know, not only what we're gonna do about it, how we're gonna deal with it, but can we even be able to be still hopeful in certain way, because after all, we mediators cannot live without hope. I mean, is profoundly, hopefully infused activity.
Right. That's the light. That's what we bring.
Yeah, and hopefulness and helplessness is something what we encounter every time when we sit with these people. Okay. Sometimes we feel that we are essentially helpless, that we cannot help them, and so forth, So it's not an easy task, but, as long as we are hanging, as I would put it, it's all good.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I know that we are over time. The final thing that I think I want to say about this book is it's chock full of stories. And as Dan mentioned, a lot of these stories are great examples of how we can behave in these difficult situations, right? So I think it's wonderful to get lost in it and find a difficult mediation you're going through, and then you can find an example that Dan has shared that you can relate to. And what I love, Dan, was that you were so transparent. You held up the mirror to yourself and you said, and here's sometimes where I didn't do a great job. Here's something that I tried and it didn't work, and here's what I learned from it. And then, Tara, I can really see your hand on it because you took those stories and you made them so eloquent. And then I love that you added all these beautiful quotes. I have a lot of these quotes written down. Life is choices, they're relentless. No sooner have you made one choice than another is upon you. Or when we practice loving kindness and compassions, we are the first ones to profit. Like the book is chock full of really rich ideas. So thank you. There are no wasted words in there. It was definitely written with an art and a science. So I appreciate that. All right, I know that we are over time, but I just wanted to thank you again for writing this book and bringing us back to the roots of mediation and reminding us how beautiful and powerful those are. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Claire and Colin, thanks for having us. Claire, thanks so much for the conversation. Really appreciate it. Tara, thank you for writing that book with me. Appreciate it.
Oh, Dan, thank you. And thanks to everyone for your comments and questions. Really appreciate it.
Yes.
Of course. Yeah, of course. I'm assuming after this, we will share a link about
I've got the video recorded. We'll edit it and I'll share it with everyone. But
good.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you so much, Tara. And Colin, you're next on the book club for next month. So thank you for that. And Milan, I'm all ready to sign you up for a book club. Get writing so you can get it finished.
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to take a little time, I have to tell you.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.